Well, literally any platform it'll run on. Typically, you'd probably run it off the cloud, but we're going to make a local instance. Okay. So what I would do, I think, is just do Mongo. Let's do DB. And let's go to download. And it gives us to the Mongo download center. So once I get the actual. And what we want is the community server. And it kind of tells what you've got here. So, you know, we want the Windows one. There's, actually, it's only showing Windows, but if you look over here, there's Linux. And there's the Mac OS X. Okay, so I'm going to do the Windows one. I'm just going to download the MSI. MSI is the installer, Microsoft installer. Actually, let me, since I've got that going, let's maximize. And then it asks, do you want to save it or run it? Either one works. I will save it. Okay, so it's done. I mean, it's a really small download. And I can go through this again if you want. You want me to go through it again?
Yeah, because I just got it. Just got to the site here.
All right. So you want to, I guess I'll run it in a minute. What I did was just a quick search for MongoDB downloads. I go to the Mongo Download Center. I was already there. It should come up. Why is it not coming up this time? Probably, but give me a second. Mongo Download Center. We did that. It should just come up. There it goes. You want the community server. It's the free one that you can run locally. Some of these others are, most of these others are on enterprise server to be local, but most of these are cloud-based. So I just looked around to show you have Windows and Mac options and Linux options, but what you want to do is download the MSI. Okay. So this is MongoDB Download Center. When you get there, it'll have this. You just want to scroll down to the where it says Download MSI. The MSI is the installer. You can run it. Once it says download, you can run it. I didn't, so I need to go into my download folder. And there's the MongoDB, and I'll just double click it. I'll maximize this here, or not maximize, I'll do a magnifier. So it's already at 200%. So it says, welcome to MongoDB 3.4.10. So I'm just going to do next. And you have to agree. You always have to accept. You can read it if you want, but you always have to accept. I'm going to do next. And let's do complete, yes. And then just hit install. Okay, so you need to get permission. This is why we're not doing it on the underlying machine. And then really, this is an easy install. There's one minor thing that we have to do after it finishes. I need to go into the file folder. I need to go to C drive. And I need to add a folder here. I don't know why the install doesn't do this. All right. So this is local drive C after the install. What I want to do, I'm just going to right click, new folder. And I'm going to call it data, the lowercase d. Inside the data folder, I want to make two other folders. So a new folder, one is just called DB, and the other is called log. So new folder log. I don't know if case matters, but I would do it all in lowercase. So I created, I'm going to go back up. I created a new folder called data. And inside that folder, I added DB and log. If you don't do this, it won't work. And I don't know why they make you do this manually rather than just add those in the install. It took me a while to figure that out, by the way. You have to go online and find something. You're still not in? What is it not doing?
Oh, it's fine.
Oh, okay. So I just did a video of this, and it's actually a really easy install. Download the file, run it. When it's done running, you just add these 3 folders. Everybody got that? Yeah. So if you go to, are you at the Mongo download community? So it's MongoDB Download Center, and then Community Server, and then just scroll down.
You said you have to accept the terms of the license.
Yes, if you don't accept the license terms, your install is finished. It won't install. That's true of almost all software. There have been some legal arguments about that, but the fact is if you don't click yes, it doesn't install.
And the setup type is complete.
Yes. So you want to run complete, say yes to allowing it to change the machine, and then
So
get into your virtual machine. We're downloading it's an easy install. Okay. I want to show you how to launch it. This is one thing that's going to probably, it's very, very different than a relational database. And I want to show you some of the ways that it's different. In a typical company, there will be a mixture of a NoSQL and relational databases. The relational databases are more for the transaction types that the business runs, the business things. And the NoSQL will be things like capturing social media and doing other things, but they will try to analyze the things together. that's a whole nother story, which we won't go into, but there's all sorts of software out there trying to blend these things so you can analyze them together.
Before you go on, and so the folders were what again?
So the folders, once you've installed it, so on C drive, there's data, just data with lower. I think it's better to do it lowercase. I don't know that case matters on a Windows machine no matter what, but. And then inside the data folder, there's DB and log, two more folders. The DB is where all your data will go. All your databases will be in there. What? It does. Right. If you put it elsewhere, you have to go into the batch file and change it.
So I'm making two folders, one's named DB and one's log.
Inside of the data folder, yes. So you have a data folder on C. So right click there and add as do new folder. And then call it data. And then click to go inside that. Just click out of it first and then double click it. And then inside of that, do right click and do new folder. And one of them is DB. So yeah, just type it as DB. And the other one, just click out and do it again. Right click and new folder is log. You guys don't get it?
Yeah. No, I'm all kind of.
Let's start.
Thank you.
Yeah, that's not an error. Yeah, it's a nice sequel. Well, saying it's fine.
Yeah, it just goes to the like Mongolian? Mango.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh, it's not really big.
Yeah.
So,
It's a fruit.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I wanted
Close, but no.
Yeah.
Mango. Mango. This is mango.
anyone else? Well, if it tells you to restart food. Did you run it down?
Yes. And I'm trying to do it just one.
So, All right, let me show you, everybody, most everybody got it? Yeah. Oh, there's no installer? You can install that. You have to do it like that. I'm gonna show how to do it. Yeah. I'll change, so do it however you use it. And it's first, that'll be first one. Now you do ever log in here? Right, but it's not, we're in a different, this system isn't the library system. Your whole last name, first letter, first name, your whole last name. Try password, have you logged in this one? Try PF. That's a, yes, okay. But then we have to download the virtual.
After you get the screen back from the reset.
Yeah.
How do you get it?
All right, so MongoDB has no graphical interface. This is fun.
What?
All right, so what I'm going to do is I'm going to go down to Cortana. And I'm going to type CMD. You guys know this? Actually, don't use PowerShell. It won't work. And I don't know why. I've tried it with PowerShell and it doesn't work. There may be a PowerShell interface that I don't know about, but the general commands don't work. I'm going to, while I'm here, I'm going to right-click, and I'm going to change my font. You don't have to do this, but I'm just going to make it a little bit bigger. Okay. Is that readable? Now, how many of you have ever done DOS? Most of you. Yeah, or Linux, for that matter. It's the main thing we have to do is we have to go back to root. So CD / will take you back to root. And then we need to get the path. Now, there are ways, if you know how to do it, you can put this into the paths of Windows and not have to type it every time. But I'm not going to show you how to do that. So if you want to, you can. But I'm going to do CD. And I am going to, let's see if I can remember this path. C : Mongo. Oh, I think it's actually program files. MongoDB server 3.4, I think. Bin. Let's see if that works. It did. That is the path. So this is the path to where Mongo is, right? Mongo is in the program files. There's a folder called MongoDB. Inside of that, there's a folder called server. And inside of that, the version of the server, and then the binary files. One of the problems with the command line is that typos are a pain. How many? Everybody got this? Yeah. You're in virtual yet?
No.
Yeah. When you get in.
But I had to you can reset it.
What? Not really. It might. Did it say? Were you in there and it required you to reboot?
Yeah.
Some did. If you had to reboot, you're probably fine. You can probably bring up the command. Did you do the folders?
Huh?
The folders. You have to create a couple of folders.
I did.
Yeah, and do CD / I would like to do that there. So hey, I don't know. All right, so I'm holding here. Are you guys ready? Have you kind of got it? Program. So after you go to root, then you type in CD. CD is always for change directory. Again, because this is Windows, it's not case sensitive. If you're doing it on Linux or Mac, it may well be. And the command may be different. If you're on Linux, actually CD is still change directory, right?
Yeah.
Are
these the same as bash commands?
No, these are DOS. But if you're on Linux, they would be bash commands. You'd have to do the bash equivalents. And I suspect on the Mac, you'd have to do the bash equivalent. Anybody know? I've never run this on a Mac. I have run it on Linux.
On Mac, it's fast.
Yeah. So what I want to do is I want to run an executable here called MongoD. So you have to get to the binary folder for this, but MongoD is the actual server.
So this is case sensitive then, because I just.
I don't think so on Windows, but it probably is case sensitive on Macs and on Linux.
I just typed that and it says the syntax of the command is incorrect and I didn't use
Let me see.
caps like you, so.
CDC program files, MongoDB. Oh, you don't have a, instead of a slash there, you have a,
Right here,
yeah.
okay.
When I press enter, it will execute the server. You'll get a note probably that the firewall has blocked it. I'm going to allow, but we're not actually going to access it remotely. So for the most part, you can ignore all of this. It's just telling you that it all launched. The key is down at the bottom. It is waiting for connections. You need to have this open to run the Mongo. You could probably install it on your underlying machine. What we'll have to do is I'll have to give you permission. Yeah, go ahead. It really doesn't matter. I might have him. So we don't Anybody else get access to that?
Maybe you have to start.
Well,
You should have. You're that.
yeah. Yeah.
Don't worry about that. Go to sleep. Program files.
Which one?
Program files.
Oh, yeah. That's fine. You can do
Server.
Mongo. Oh, it's not.
Oh, shoot.
If you install it, you run it.
Control C. Oh, my God.
It's open.
Control C. And then the CD.
And then what can it say?
Yeah, CD and then just space.
Space.
Control
Yeah.
maybe typing Mongo. Same. Same. I know.
Yeah, I don't think.
Weird.
Yeah, so you're
The firewall would only matter if we were coming in from outside.
They shut it off so we can do it over here.
It's just her.
Oh, you know what, that's what Mongo DB. As I said, the typos in this will be a pain. So we're waiting, right? What you have to do now is you have to go back and you have to launch another command. We need two command windows, two DOS windows. Yeah, so this one you can minimize. Don't close it, but you can minimize it if you want. That's the server and it's waiting for connections. This is going to be the client. The client is still a command line, but it's a different program. So same thing, we have to do CD, go back to root. I want that to go down. And then I'm going to CD, C, program files, same path. Yes, you have to have a space in program files. Program files, MongoDB, server, 3.4, bin. The reason I can type that path so well is I've typed it hundreds of times. What? Which one? On bin? Not after bin, no. Once we're here, we can call the different programs. And the one we want is Mongo, just Mongo. There we go. Did I get an error? Let's see. Use. I think it's okay. Let me look over the other one. Because notice at the very bottom, it's not. It now says connection accepted. Right on the server part, so it says connection accepted, and it gives you that. Now, this is a very different database model, and I'm going to spend like 2 minutes here. So don't panic if it didn't get installed, because we got a little bit of time. Because I'm mostly just going to show you. I just wanted to get it set up. This environment is very different. It doesn't use SQL. One of the things about NoSQL is that it doesn't have a prescribed structure to the database. That being said, you should still form it. If it's totally random in the structure, which it would allow, it's utterly useless when you try to figure out what's going on. So you have to create some kind of structure. I'm going to use a database. What do we want to call it? I think there might be a test database, so I wanted to give it a different name. Well, let's use test. All right, notice how it says switch to DB test. This kind of drives me nuts, but you know, if there wasn't a test database, there is now. All you have to say is you want to use a database to create it. Use test.
So you can spawn off database.
You can just find by accident fairly easily, yeah. If you say use the database, if the database doesn't exist, it creates it. Yeah.
Well, it can only replace databases.
You won't really replace it. If database exists, it'll just bring up that database. Yeah. You need a CD. CD. There, but then you need another CD. Not like that.
Yeah.
CD.
Maybe it's not installed.
Space. CD. Back. And you do that. All right, so that's the one of your here. CD.
Yeah.
Program files. You have to have a CD there. Yes. You're trying to change the two after that. Yeah, don't press enter. When you press enter, it ends the other command. Server backslash.
Trying to get that second one. Still, so I'm trying to go your way.
So, press CD backslash. Yeah. Type in CD. And then press and then CD. Paste in that same part. Yeah, control V. Yeah, enter. Mongo. Enter. And say use DB, use test, space test.
Yeah, I'll try to come up with a list of command line shortcuts. I'm not real good at them, but I'll try to come up with a list of them because there are ways to repeat a line. There are ways to do things. So we're in test, and I'm going to just real quickly do DB, and I'm going to do dot test collection. I'll try. Is that?
Yeah.
Okay, DB test collection. And I'm going to do dot find. Yeah, so a collection is what the equivalent of a table. And just like with a database, if I do some function, DB is our database, right? DB is test. Collection, if test collection doesn't exist, it makes it. This again is a pain because I mistype a lot. So I have bad collections that don't, that are wrong. So you have to be careful about that kind of thing. So this is a test collection. Find would search it. It'd be like select star from. But what we'll end up with is nothing because there's nothing in it. But the test collection now exists. And again, don't worry too much about this right now. I'm just kind of giving you, just make sure that the environment is sort of working. I'm going to bring up Notepad. And then I'm going to close this stuff down. As I said, I just kind of want to make sure you guys can do this. I'm going to just do, again, if I can get down there, Notepad. And I'm going to show you what a record would look like, and we'll insert that one record. And I don't know why that came up in front of that. So how many of you have ever played with JSON? One person, two, three, few of you. So that's what they look like. Records are JSON. JSON is JavaScript object notation. It's become increasingly a way of transferring data across the internet, and most NoSQL databases tend to store things and query things in terms of JSON. So I'm just going to do a curly brace. Is that big enough? Let me get the font. It's up to you. It's not part of it. It's just showing you how the assignment will work. I'm just going to make the font bigger. 20. So even zoom. So curly brace. The line breaks aren't as essential, but the curly brace is essential. I'm just going to give, I'm going to call it test. Actually, I'm just going to call it ID. And it should be like an underscore ID. If you don't do an ID, it makes one for you. I'm just going to give it an ID of 1. Going to do a comma. I'll give it like test name. I have no idea what to name this test. Let's just do test date. I'm not making it a date. There are ways to make it a date. I'm just going to do the way it is right now. It's a string, although there are functions that could turn that into something else. One last thing. I have no idea what. Anybody have any idea what else to add? What? Thought I heard something. What? Sure. And this is 1130, so we'll do that. If I don't put quotes around it, it is an integer. All right. So this is a minimal JSON, right? This is really minimal. It starts with a curly brace. It ends with a curly brace. Inside of it, that underscore ID is a Mongo field that everything gets. If you assign it, it'll take whatever you assign it. If you don't assign it, it will add it, and it will give you a random number, which may be fun. It's not the same as a primary key, although it does uniquely identify the record. You can't use it to make foreign keys. I mean, there's no relationships. Basically, the structure of JSON is of a name value, key value, right? The name of the field, key, and then the value. Key value is key value pairs. It can get more complicated than that because on the other side of the colon could be an array, could be a whole other object, because you can embed JSON objects inside of JSON objects. I mean, it can get really complicated. If you ever want to, maybe before we shut down today, because with this, I could show you the JSON definition for a Twitter file. It's about 4 pages long. For which?
For the keys.
You can have them or not have them. It doesn't seem to make any difference. if you have a space in this, you absolutely must have quotes. Does that make sense? But if you don't have any space in it, you don't have to have quotes. Quotes over here are a little bit, sometimes I put them generally. When you do the output, it will put quotes around everything. I mean, each field. So I'm going to copy this. When I do this, I tend to do these in Notepad and then just copy and paste them into the command line because it is really hard to edit these in the command line. Yeah.
So is this like Project Leadfield for Google?
Might be. There are lots of NoSQL databases.
Oh, so any NoSQL database.
Almost any NoSQL database. Most of the NoSQL databases run on JSON. All right. So the AWS, their dynamic DB, is a JSON-based database. Most of them are. Most of the NoSQL. I know that Facebook is working on one that's a combination of JSON and SQL. They're trying to get the benefits of both in the same database. I have no idea how that'll work, but so I copied that. I want to go to the one that has the database. I'm going to do DB test collection dot insert. I'm going to do a parentheses, and then I'm going to right click, which right click by itself paste, and I don't know why. And then I'm going to close the parentheses. These are a pain because any parentheses out of place, any curly brace out of place, any comma out of place, and it won't work. So insert starts with the parentheses. It's a function. Inside, what you're going to insert is a JSON file. And again, we'll go over this again. We'll do a couple of things in practice. This is just your first introduction. I'm going to do enter, and it worked. It said it inserted one. If I do db dot test collection dot find now, yeah, I know the beeping is annoying. So I did db test collection dot insert parentheses. I pasted it in. Right click if you copied it. Right click will paste. Close the parentheses at the end. If you don't close the parentheses at the end, it won't work. When I do find now, it actually finds my record. Yeah, so it's insert. As I said, don't panic. This is just a show and tell at this point. Right, yeah, it's insert. It has to be lowercase. Within the context here, it is case sensitive. And generally, the general practice, I'm doing camel case, but a lot of them just do all lowercase. You have to be consistent if you're going to search for it, right? Now, so there's a sort of a structure here you could do, but your next record in this field doesn't have to look like this one at all. You can put in records in the test collection that don't have the same structure at all. Doesn't object to it. There's no schema. There's no structure pre-specified. That being said, if you're not consistent, your results aren't going to make any sense. I'll show you later how to, I mean, this gives you some idea of how you search for things. You can put in these find parentheses. You can put another JSON file or JSON structure that will search for other JSON structures. We'll do that later. Okay. Anybody, if you want to quit at this, I think exit, it might be quit. Exit says bye. Okay.
Okay. So. Oh, you don't. Yeah. So this environment is more challenging because of the command line, right? But for what it's worth, the world is moving more and more towards command line for everything. So it's not a bad idea to get a hang of it. And hardcore programmers usually despise anything but the command line, although I have never gotten there.
Just a little bit.
Yeah.
Very black and white. Deal with it.
You can if you really want, you can change the colors. If you wanted it white on blue or you wanted some other color combination, you can do that. If you go to like right click on that C, there's a thing where there's properties and defaults. The properties that we do, so colors. So you could change, you could do, you really can do purple and pink, yes. I think you would regret it very soon. I'm going to leave it black, but some people do like that. You can reverse it if you wanted. You could do white on black. I mean, black on white. You can do, I mean, you can change things however you wish. When I first started computers, they were kind of amber. The letters are kind of amber and black. Yeah. Well, this has to be done. Yes, you have to have the other one.
And this? All right.
Where you need the other one.
Yeah, I just take screenshots and write notes and highlight. So how we just did. And I've got it all the way back.
That one you just need to
But I'll share
This
this
is the-
with you. I shared it with Nicole too.
It's the server, the other one is the client. So believe it or not, this is the equivalent of the management studio or the workbench. I mean, it's the client. And generally, I haven't seen any good graphical clients. You can make for your own application, you can make a client, but it's usually application specific as opposed to just being a generic database one. There are some clients that will, but they're more for network statistics. They're more summaries of reads and writes and etc. So I closed it anyway, and we'll come back to it. As I said, this was just, I just wanted to get it installed for as many people as possible and give you a quickie overview. I may do quick, I don't need to save that, I don't think. I may do a quick PowerPoint here. And you can close this. This one you can just close. But you always have to start the server before you start the client. For what it's worth, there is a command line client for SQL Server and a command line client for MySQL. So we need to install on yours, or did you get it going? Andy? Is anybody else doing it on a Mac? Did you have issues or did it work?
I'm still trying to get connected, but only because I have to change
The paths?
myself to the, like, how to find myself here.
Okay. Let me know, because I don't know much about installing it on the Mac, and can't help much with that. So if you succeed, either of you, if you succeed, can let me know so I can help other people down the road. It should work on a Mac just fine. I just don't know the pathing issues and things like that. All right. So I think I might real quickly from here, and I don't want to spend a lot of time at it. I might also lower the zoom. There is, if you go to the modules, there is under the Mongo. Come on. Modules. And I want to go down to the ones for Mongo. And I was going to just real quickly walk through a PowerPoint very quickly. I'm not going to spend a lot of time on it. So I'm going to go to the external link. It's actually a Google Doc. And I'll go to present. Maximize that. Okay, so I want to just talk a little bit about NoSQL in general. As I said, it's a very different database model. A couple of things to know about the relational model. It's been around since the 1970s, right? So the relational model has basically ruled, and all attempts to create an alternate structure have pretty well failed until the NoSQL came about. They've been growing in popularity, and the reason that I want to show you a little bit about it is that typically businesses these days are using a mixture of SQL databases and NoSQL databases. And if you look at the job, job advertisements out there, there's a lot of requests for NoSQL. Mongo is just one NoSQL. There are dozens of them. Mongo is one of the most popular, but it is, as I said, there are dozens of them, and they all have their own variations of what they do. They can actually interact with SQL databases, but in general, they don't have a schema, meaning they don't have a structured table structure. They don't have relationships. They don't have columns and rows. One record can differ from another record, and it doesn't complain at all. So, and then sometimes that's good. As I said, that not all data fits into tables and columns, right? Some data just doesn't fit well into that. And typically what NoSQL is using are for like screen scrapings off of the web, capturing social media stuff, which is all over the place, right? For text and pictures and different kinds of comments and things that they can use. So it doesn't necessarily, as I said, fit in really neatly into columns and rows like a relational database would have. Relational databases are also getting so that they can read and write JSON. MySQL can do it. MariaDB can do it. SQL Server can do it now if you have the newest version. So, as I said, they can vary in the same structures. They don't enforce relational integrity. And relational databases are all about not repeating stuff. In NoSQL, you'll find the same stuff repeated all over the place. With the same dangers of misspelling it here, not being able, when you do a query, not being able to see the variations because you've spelled it differently at different times. I mean, all those dangers still remain, but they usually don't care as much.
NoSQL databases are fast. They actually can be performed faster than relational databases. They are extremely flexible, right? A lot of like agile developers like them because you don't have to sit down and go through a pattern of figuring out your tables and your relationships. And you would in agile and in the current DevOps, a lot of times they're trying to deploy in like a 5-week cycle, which is insane. And that's why there's so much crap out there, but that's a different story. But they need to they want to put stuff out fast, right? And this allows you to do it fast, whereas a relational database tends to have a slowing effect because you have to structure it so carefully. A relational database, when you want to make a relational database really big, or you want to distribute it, you need to buy a lot of big hard drives. Does that make sense? Basically, the way to make a, I don't know, 200 terabyte database is to have 200 terabytes of hard drive space. But NoSQL can be spread, distributed across the internet. You can put it on a lot of really cheap machines. It can be spread all over the world. So you can make gigantic databases very cheaply because they can be distributed across many, many machines. You don't need the really big hard drives or the really big processors. That being said, when you query a NoSQL that's distributed like that, they never promise that you're going to get all the data back. They only promise that basically they have algorithms, and Hadoop is part of this. They will retrieve as much as they can in a reasonable amount of time. Does that make sense? A few seconds. But if something's offline or something's unavailable, it just ignores it.
How secure?
Not very. There was a huge Mongo got hacked pretty badly not too long ago. And the reason, I mean, you can put some security on it, but a lot of people weren't. So the security is mostly network. Making sure that your firewalls are well configured, making sure that the network security makes sense. You can put user permissions on things in it, though those permissions are stored in a JSON file, which is plain text. So it depends on what they're getting. They're adding things to it like encryption and better user security. In general, though, people are not using these for like their core relational business model. Their point of sale, their inventory. They're generally not using NoSQL for that kind of thing. And so security may not be as huge an issue, although, as I said, when they got attacked, it was basically you're getting malware with some queries. Because it's a JavaScript file it could execute, if you do it. NoSQL databases, as I said, are faster and easier to deploy. Because they don't enforce relational integrities, they have all the problems and risks of redundancy, as I said. Because of the ways that files are distributed in large databases, you can't guarantee that the question will be current or accurate when you do an answer. There's no ACID. There's no atomicity, consistency, isolation, or durability necessarily. Again, that doesn't necessarily matter depending on what you're using it for. That I wouldn't use these for a point of sale. Some people do. But if you're going to use a NoSQL for a point of sale, all of your consistency has to be enforced in the software you're running. Because the database isn't going to enforce anything. Does that make sense? You almost have to treat it as if it were a relational database and enforce that every record has the same structure, and you have to enforce that with the software. The database doesn't enforce it. Most SQL databases have what they call eventual consistency, meaning that eventually they'll arrive at a consistent result. And again, that doesn't necessarily matter a lot if you're basically downloading social media stuff for big data statistics, right? It does matter a lot if you're doing your accounting.
Um, so there's some types of NoSQL databases, and there's key value pairs, which is essentially Mongo is kind of a mixture of this and this. Basically JSON, within JSON you have your key, which is the field name, colon, and the value, right? So that's essentially what that means. But also each JSON object is a document. It's treated like a document, a separate document in Mongo. Column family stores are the ones that are most confusing to me. They basically treat columns like rows, and I'm not sure how. I'll have to research that one because that one confuses me. The graph database, these are kind of neat. They treat your data as points in a multi-dimensional grid, and their output is a graph, right? It could be a map or it could be a matrix of all the relationships between different points. They're pretty neat. I mean, if you wanted to see all of the connections that somebody has on Facebook and how all those connections interweave with somebody else's connections, you could do that with a graph database. They still are essentially JavaScript structured. I'm not real fond of JavaScript, but it's taking over the world. So there's a link with some more stuff about just general NoSQL databases. I won't go into that right now, but there are some varieties, and they're good for different things, right? The graphing ones aren't necessarily good for coming up with a lot of tables and charts, but they're really good for drawing connections, things like that. So Mongo is the most popular. It's free. It's open source. It's a document type, and the main interface is the command line, which can be, as I said, a bit annoying. So we need to start the server, which we did. This one, basically, to create a database, all you have to do is say use and whatever the database name is. So this says use text store, and that would create it. And if you do db product collection find, you would have a collection called product collection. So I said that's really nice, except if you type something wrong, then you have a collection you don't want. And then JSON, and this is pretty close to what we did. I did quote them here. These are not quoted because they're numbers, although actually it doesn't matter a whole lot. If you quote the numbers, they're still numbers. It doesn't beat them. The ID, as I said, is a built-in field. If you don't provide one, it will provide it for you. And is that?
Should you provide an ID every time, or?
It's really up to you. I mean, if you want there, it gives you usually like a 15-digit number.
Yeah, a very long number.
Yeah. So if you were to try to imitate relational structures to some way, like repeat this ID in another collection to make a connection here, you can do that. It won't do a join. You have to do separate queries to make those links. But you could do that in order to cut down redundancy. Typically what they do in a NoSQL, though, is that they would just embed the whole record inside of another record, or in like an array of them. They don't usually do the join so much, but you could use that key if you wanted to do kind of a fake join.
The JSON part there.
Yeah.
If you wanted to search for instead of errors and values, value pairs.
Yeah, we haven't done any search yet, but basically what you do is you would say find, and inside of the find, you'd have the curly braces, and then you would do product colon Chromebook, and it would search for Chromebook. What do you mean?
sees the price, quantity available.
Right.
You want to know all of it.
Yeah, well, if you do find without anything, it returns all your records. And if I were to do Chromebook, it would return all the Chromebooks. Assuming you typed Chromebook the same each time. And if you wanted to do, actually that's expensive for a Chromebook. They were selling them for 99 bucks. Not too long ago. Chromebooks don't let you, they're just internet facing, right? They have no hard drive much. You can query this in a lot of different ways. Like you could query just this product, or you could query all the Chromebooks, or you could query everything that was greater than $200. You could query it by the quantity available, right? It actually is pretty good. So this is I inserted a whole bunch of products. You can actually do bulk inserts like this too. Just insert them all together. They have square brackets around it because you're essentially inserting an array. And then I think I did, this is a find where it shows all of those. So this is looking for an average price. Don't worry about it too much. It has a $sign is for a variable. Group ID. Null means we're not looking for a particular ID. Average price. And there's a function. This is basically a field name. We're looking for the average, again, a variable price, which is a variable to store all of the prices that go through there. So when it returns the answer, it's ID null, average price is 412. Don't worry about that. I don't think I actually have you do any averages, but you can. And I think that's it for this PowerPoint. I'm going to show you how,
That's what I actually have there.
yeah.
That's basically the C program, the average price function. That's
Well, it's JavaScript, but yeah, everything in it is JavaScript. JavaScript looks like C. It does, but the difference is that it's loosely typed. In C, you could never create a variable on the spot like that. You would have to give it a data type. Yeah. All right, so that's good enough for that. The other thing I might show you, and then I'm going to give you the rest of the time to work on catching up, if you need to. So I think it's Conger Prep at Blogspot. Not at, just Blogspot. It's just a different blog. So Mongo first steps with NoSQL is here, and it basically goes through. This is not something you have to do, but I just wanted to show you that it was there. I did setting up and configuring. So this takes you to the path where we got, the Mongo. Tells about setting up the data, the database, and the log file. This was version 3.2. We're on 3.4 now. You run the Mongo exec, Mongo D. You don't have to write the .exe. And then the command shell, setting that up. And then I did switch to books, and I inserted some records for books, and did a couple of queries. And I also created a text index, which allows you to look for individual words, like if you have a long text field. And I did a couple of admin commands there. That's probably that very first one, which says beginning with no SQL. I'll try to make a link to it in the Canvas. It's probably everything more than what we would do.
you know, with the SQL. There's more here. So I did another one where I brought in some more complicated queries. And then I did a Python thing where I created used Python to talk to Mongo. And I think the very last part I did, I actually created a front end to just one database with Python and Mongo. It's not a very sophisticated front end, but if you really want to look at some of the Mongo stuff, you could look there. It's my blog. It's actually congerprepblogspot.com. I'll make a link to it. This is a blog. So the other one that I have a link to is classroom specific. And I just paste without much comment whatever we do in class up there. This one is where I actually go through and try to do a tutorial and think through things. So there are other things in there like model view control. And I was working on Android. I don't think I ever finished that app though. There's a thing here, I should have remembered this, getting SQL Server and setting up databases. It might have helped. All right. So I'll make a link of that. But I'm going to give you the remainder time, and we'll see if you need more time on Wednesday, because I took more time than I meant to. But to finish up the MySQL, and then we'll do the NoSQL. And basically what we're going to do with NoSQL is we're going to create another database. This one will be for like tracking shows in town at the different venues. And I think that it's more of a social media kind of thing that I think could fit into a NoSQL better. And we will we'll make some collections and we'll add some records and do a few simple queries, just to give you the experience of having done this. All right, I'm going to kill the video. And so you have the rest of this time to work. I may give you some more time next time too to work on the MySQL. Then we'll go through the assignments for the NoSQL more.